The Minister of Environmental Affairs, Barbara Creecy, will today participate in the Labour Organisation discussion on delivering a gender-responsive, just transition for all. The Minister is now leading the South African delegation and will be assisted by the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi. Pandor. President Cyril Ramaphosa has wrapped up his visit to the UAE, where he participated at COP28. For more now, we cross to SABC News International editor Sophie Mokoena, who is in Dubai. Ms. Sophie, good morning to you. Thanks indeed for your time. Take us through the highlights of the conference.
Well, I think yesterday the focus was when President Ramaphosa participated in two different events. One where it was about looking at clean methods to cook, and particularly for women in countrysides. This event was organized and also facilitated by the President of Tanzania, President Suluhu Hassan. The intention here is to highlight plight of women in the countryside, particularly in relation to ensuring that they are able to get resources to ensure that they have facilities that they can use for cooking and in a clean way. And the second important issue was his engagement with us, where he spoke about the just energy transition after he presented a document to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. That document outlined the South African position and processes the country is going to take in the implementation of the just energy transition. And also we were able to speak to the Development Bank, African Development Bank President, who spoke about the fact that it is time for African countries and the developed South to ensure that they do have resources to implement programs aimed at addressing the challenges of climate change. Let's take a listen at what the President of the African Development Bank had to say about resources, particularly issues related to finance.
Africa is choking from climate change. We only contribute 3% of global emissions, but we are suffering disproportionately from the negative consequences of it. Today we lose $7 to $15 billion a year. And if nothing is done very quickly, that's going to rise to $50 billion a year by 2040. But we are not simply folding our hands. We are Africa's premier financial institution. What we've done at the African Development Bank is that we've decided that we will commit at least 40% of our total financing every single year for climate finance. And in fact, since we set that target 3 years ago, we have exceeded it. Today we have 44% of all of our financing going to climate finance. But the issue for Africa is we have droughts, we have floods, we have pest infestations, you have cyclones that have affected places like Malawi, that has affected places like Zimbabwe and Mozambique. And so the issue is how we help these countries to manage these extreme shocks by adapting to it. And that's why the African Development Bank launched a very bold program together with the Global Center on Adaptation called the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, or we call it simply AAAP, is to mobilize $25 billion to support African countries to adapt to climate change. And by the way, that is the largest effort on climate change globally. And the African Development Bank today, we devote 67% of all our financing for climate adaptation, because that's what the real thing is. And so right here at COP, we had a great meeting, standing room only, presidents, heads of state from around the world, prime ministers, everybody was there to support us on this great effort for climate adaptation for Africa. Secondly, is that we have farmers. African farmers have no insurance. 97% of them don't have any insurance. And when they grow their crops, they have to pray that it's going to rain. They have to pray again that it will not rain when they harvest the crop. they have to pray that when they go to the markets, the price will not collapse. That's because there's no support systems around our farmers. And that's why at the African Development Bank, we have a program that we've been doing for the last 3 years, actually, which actually provides a payment for insurance for countries to insure them against drought, flood, cyclones, and so on. And like in Madagascar, which is in Southern Africa region, when they had 3 years of drought, we were able to work to insure them against these events, and they got about more than $50 million in payments to support millions of farmers that were affected. Same for Malawi as well. So right here at COP28, we launched what's called the Africa Climate Risk Insurance Facility for Adaptation. It's a $1 billion facility that will now pay a lot of insurance for many of the countries to protect themselves against the shocks of climate, but also to reinsure themselves in global capital markets. The other thing that we just did, I'm just coming from it right now, is we launched right here what is called the Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa. As you know, Africa has a lot of minerals and metals. We have a lot of renewable energy. So therefore, we must be greening our infrastructure system. But we need financing, like you said, for that. And so we just launched what's called the AGIA, Africa Green Infrastructure, Alliance for Green Infrastructure in Africa, to mobilize $10 billion for investment in green infrastructure. That could be green energy, it could be green hydrogen, it could be green transport systems, it could be improved water and sanitation and desalinization. So these are concrete things that we are doing because, you don't adapt to climate change by talking. Africa simply needs a lot more financing. It's not getting enough financing, by the way. I must be clear, we're trying our best, because when it comes to adapting to climate change, Africa gets no more than $11 billion a year.
Ms. Sophie, talk to us about the engagement as well that Minister Barbara Creecy will also be having today.
Pointed out that they will have to raise money for the continent. And later today, we expect the Minister, Barbara Creecy, to participate in a session where they are going to discuss gender in relation to the transition. In other words, how do you bring in women in particular to participate in a process of ensuring that we implement policies related to fighting the greenhouse emissions. And we expect the minister again to touch on the South African document, this one that deals with just energy transition. Back to you, Griselda.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Mokoena, SABC News International editor, wrapping things up for us in Dubai, of course. As COP28, of course, concludes, South Africa's president was also involved in discussions representing, of course, our country there.